Okay, let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wasallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmeen. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I hope and pray you're all doing well, inshallah. You've had a productive week and you have good intentions for this week ahead, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We were on Iqalah. We've gone through the principles of everything and the kind of like the usul of this bab. Ahmad Yunus, you want to go ahead? Shaykh Yunus?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Babul Iqalah. Just to remind you, Mufti Sab, that that missed Ibara.
Oh yes, subhanallah, that missed the bar. We'll have to keep it missing for now.
Okay, all right. Bismillah. Babul Iqalah. الإقالة جائزة في البيع بمثل الثمن الأول فإن شرط أكثر منه أو أقل فالشرط باطل ويرد مثل الثمن الأول.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So look, the first question is, what is the mahiyya of iqala? This is the first question. What is actually iqala? To understand the mahiyya of iqala, we have to do a linguistic investigation. We have to look at the nas as well, and then we have to look at what a bay' is. To understand the mahiyya of something, there's multiple ways to analyze something. In fiqh, not only do you have to understand the fiqhi reasoning and rationale, you have to understand the mahiyya of things. Like, what is the thing, the shay that you are analyzing? It's all investigations. Fiqh is a practice of investigations. How do you investigate something in fiqh? You have to do multi-dimensional analyses. That's what you're doing here. So you're looking at one thing from multiple dimensions. That's when you understand the haqiqah of something. If you don't do this analysis from multiple dimensions, then you may not understand the full reality of something. So if we want to understand iqala, there's multiple ways to test this idea, to understand this idea from the lens of fiqh and understanding why we have iqala and what iqala is all about. So firstly, the question on the horizon, okay, what is the asl of iqala, or what is iqala as a linguistic thing itself fi nafsihi? Linguistically, iqala is simply about rafa' and to remove something. That's what iqala is all about. The question arises, okay, fine, if it's to do with rafa', that's the asl and the haqiqa of iqala, just like kind of remove something, that's what it is. Then from a contractual perspective, is iqala a is it qiyas or istihsan? That's the question that arises. What is the haqiqa of iqala? Is the idea of iqala qiyas or is the idea istihsan? If it's qiyas, that means it is a natural outcome, dictate, consequence, result of a bay'. If it's not, then it can't be qiyas. It would be khilaf al-qiyas. So what do you guys think? What is iqala? Like, is it something which naturally a contract demands or it doesn't demand? Anybody, what are your thoughts?
I would say doesn't demand.
Or why would you say that?
Because once a bait goes through, then that's it. Milkia should transfer. There shouldn't be any option of
Yeah, exactly.
reverse.
Absolutely. That's it, right? Because look, a bay is about tamlik. If a bay is about tamlik, iqala is opposite to what a bay is. So how can iqala be from the muqtada of an aqd when an iqala is doing exactly the opposite of what an aqd requires? A bay requires tamlik. Iqala removes tamlik. And that's why the fuqaha mention if you do a sale, bi shartil iqala, it's fasid. Now, that means we have all these contracts today. You go and buy anything, you have like refund policies and all of this. How does that become permissible then? Because If the asl is, we just mentioned, iqala, a bay, the asl in bay is tamlik. Iqala is doing the reverse of that. It's against the muqtada of an aqd. That's why iqala fi nafsihi is khilaful qiyas. It's an istihsan from the nas. And that's why the fuqaha mention, like Aini has discussed, multiple fuqaha have discussed this actually. If you have a shart of iqala in a contract, it's fasid. Because that shart is going against the muqtada of an aqd. Because an aqd is all about giving tamlik, transferring ownership. And iqala is a reversal of that. So it's going against the very purpose of a contract. So the question arises then, why do we allow all these refund uh, clauses, terms, and conditions in almost every single transaction today? What would the answer be to that potentially? How could that be permissible?
If the original party gives up their own haqq,
Okay, so you mean the seller?
yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any other ideas? That's one idea. Because if iqala is khilaf al-qiyas, it's against the muqtada and it's in every single aqd, that means we're all doing uqud fasida in essence. How would we solve this problem? Anybody? The job of a student of knowledge is to solve problems. We're problem solvers. Fiqh is about problem solving. So you have to think, how do we solve this problem? Is a real problem in the fiqh or is a problem in the context? It's easy. It'd be short facet, but it's ma'ruf now. Simple. It's based on it being widely practiced. The facade that comes here as a result is no longer felt, experienced, or neither is it seen to be an excess or deemed to be against the muqtada. Where it's not preventing, nobody deems it to be restricting the muqtada of the aqd. It's so prevalent, and that's why it's as though it's not there, or even if it's there, it's not really meaningful. That ta'liq of iqala, it's not impactful. So it's one of those sharait, potentially qiyasan, it would be fasid, istihsanan, we'd overlook it because of urf and amal upon this. That's how we um, deal with that. So look, iqala is jaiz. That's the first thing. And we discussed how, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, the asl up here of iqala is that it's not a transaction, it's not an aqd, it's not a mu'awada. Iqala is not a mu'awada. It's purely a reset and reversal. We're just taking people back to the original position. That's why it's not a haqiqatan, it's not a bay' when you do an iqala. And this is why it's khilaf al-qiyas. It's an istihsan idea. Which contract do you have in, or which surah do you have in fiqh which allows you to simply reset positions? That does not follow the logic of the law. It doesn't follow the fiqh. The fiqh requires whenever there's movement of iwad and mu'awwad, of thaman and mabi, we deem that to always be a what? A bay. So here in iqala, we're seeing a movement of thaman and movement of mabi. Haqiqatan, anybody who looks at that, and even from our fiqh lens, we deem that to be a sale. But we've moved away from the ma'na of sale, even though there's a mu'awada, a mubadala, because of nas. And that's why we're saying this is istihsan. This idea of just resetting positions is not really a following the fiqh and the qiyas that we have in bay and in mubadala. It doesn't follow the qiyas that we know. That's why it's purely an istihsan. This idea of resetting is purely an istihsan, and this targheeb and encouragement towards it. And we're doing this takeef for it to align with our fiqh. Because how do we understand this takeef? It's because of the word. It's because of, as I mentioned earlier, the idea of it being against a muqtada. All of these things add to the mahiyya of iqala and what it's haqiqah. Now, I've just mentioned there's a khilaf amongst our imma on the haqiqah of iqala. Because Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and this is where fiqh gets interesting. It's always beneficial to really understand and see the differences between the imams, because that opens different wujuh in your mind. How do you rationalize? How do you understand different things from different perspectives? How do you make sense from a fiqhi lens of different? Because all of these ma'ani, these are all our imams. They all are mujtahideen. They all like the basis of the madhab. And so their fiqh and their understanding has so much weight, more than anyone else. Now we need to see, look how they see and analyze this. Imam Abu Hanifa says, Iqala is this idea of complete reversal and fasq. That's what it is, aslan. You're just taking it back, reversal. There's no sale, there's no mubadala. If for any instance you can't make it into this kind of rafa and fasq, then the iqala will be batil. It can't be iqala. It will not be iqala at all. Imam Abu Yusuf says something else. He says, no, iqala haqiqatan, or this idea, it's a sale, it's a bay. If you can't make into a bay for any reason whatsoever, it becomes a fasq. If you can't make into a fasq, we'll just say it's batil as nothing's happened and nothing is happening. Imam Muhammad is different now. He says, no, iqala is a fasq. However, we'll make it into a sale thereafter. And only when you can't make it into a sale will you say it's batil. So everybody has understood the mahiyya of iqala differently, and the consequences of iqala are changing as a result, right? So if one thing can't happen, what's the next thing? How do we understand? And this is what they're going to discuss here. But this kitab will just talk about Imam Abu Hanifa. In Bidayat al-Mubtadi, is the qawl of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is mentioned. In Hidayah, you can find a full discussion on the qawl of Sahibain, right, and what they say and why they say. They look at, for instance, the ma'na of bay, it being like Imam Abu Yusuf looks at the idea of mubadala. He says haqiqatan is a mubadala, and that has more weight. Imam Muhammad says, no, look, aslan it's a fasq, but it also has a ma'na mubadala, and therefore you have to do ri'ayah, or you have to do i'tibar of that ma'na. And so that's where the difference is between the imams. And then this ibara which Shaykh Yunus recited as well, فَإِن شَرَطَ أَكْثَرَ مِنْهُ أَوْ أَقَلَّ. Because look, previously they mentioned بِمِثْلِ الثَّمَنِ الْأَوَّلِ. It has to be exactly the same price, because all you're doing is resetting. It's not a bay whatsoever. If you change the price, it can no longer be iqala. It'll have to then become a sale. Because once you've sold something to me, I can meet you the next day in the market and sell the item back to you. But what differentiates that from being an iqala? What's the difference? Iqala will be on the same terms as the first transaction, whereas a bay' would have its completely different terms. So I come the next day in the market, completely randomly, there's no credit terms, it's a spot sale, immediate settlement, immediate payment. I come and sell the item to you now, maybe £5 more than what I purchased from you yesterday. You just so happen to need this item, and I just so happen that I wanted to sell the item. That'll be a bait. I can do that. But the only thing that allows us to go back to iqala is when it's on the same terms, بِمِثْلِ الثَّمَنِ الْأَوَّلِ. That's where the istihsan, see, and this is the beauty, istihsan is restricted to the mawdi' of istihsan. We always, the nas, the way we understood the nas, we restrict the application of the istihsan to the nas. The moment you do ziyada in the thaman, or you decrease and do hat in the thaman, you've moved away from the mawdi' and the application of istihsan, and that's why you go back to the qiyas now. Whenever you depart the istihsan, you go straight back to the qiyas. The qiyas will be, this is now a bait. The istihsan can only be valid when the surah of istihsan is met, and that is بِمِثْلِ الثَّمَنِ الْأَوَّلِ. That's where iqala can be found. And that's why thereafter is mentioned that فَإِن شَرَطَ أَكْثَرَ مِنْهُ أَوْ أَقَلَّ فَالشَّرْطُ بَاطِلٌ وَيَرُدُّ مِثْلَ الثَّمَنِ الْأَوَّلِ. And he'll give back that shirt is not valid. It will not be accepted. And if he wants to carry on with iqala, and they have the ma'na of iqala, they have to go and give the exact same amount. Yeah, if they want to do bay, like in this scenario, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, you can't make it into a bay. It'll just the iqala will become batil, or the shirt becomes batil, and it remains as an iqala. That's what it means by shart batilun. Whereas here, Imam Muhammad's qawl would be, this is the difference now. According to Imam Muhammad, you'd make this into a sale. If there was more or less, his qawl will be, no, you can still do tashih of this aqd. There's still a ma'na of this aqd. You can move it away from iqala into a bay. So up here, a bay would happen. The shirt will be mu'tabar, but in the ma'na of a bay. Imam Abu Hanifa says, no, it will not be an iqala. It will not be an iqala. Sorry, it will not be a bay. It will remain as an iqala, but the shirt will not be mu'tabar anymore. Next.
فإن حدث بالمبيع عيب جازت الإقالة بأقل من الثمن.
Yeah, so the asal has been set now. Iqala is a reversal. That's the asal. As far as Imam Abu Hanifa is concerned, that's our asal I will take. Iqala is a reversal. You change the price and that, it's not mu'tabar. It's your, if you're going to do an iqala, the asal of iqala is just a reset. You can't do ziyada, you can't decrease. It's not even valid. It will not even be recognized. We have to do it in the same terms. However, there's a deviation. So we're deviating now slightly. So there's like we set an istihsan. The istihsan has a rule, but now look, there's a deviation from the istihsan because of another istihsan. So the first istihsan was the nas and the understanding of iqala, but then there's another istihsan which underpins most of the fiqh. So up here you are like there's layers of ma'ani in fiqh. The first layer on level 1 surface level is this idea of iqala being بمثل الثمن الأول and the shirt being batil. That is as far as iqala is concerned. I'm just trying to create like a visualization of this for you. That's in the bab of iqala. But you have other principles or usul in fiqh, what we call like ma'ani, which are not, it's not usul al-fiqh as in usul al-fiqh what you study, but the principles which flow under abwab. Every bab is pinned on different usul. There are then abwab are pinned on usul, but then there are other usul which flow under all the abwab, and they capture all the abwab of mu'amalat, for instance, or even beyond mu'amalat. One of them is darar. That is one of the key ma'ani in fiqh, which are mu'tabar in almost every single bab. Unless there's a haqq, the darar will be overlooked, but generally, whenever there's darar, we will do ri'aya, we'll do i'tibar of the ma'na. So even though there's an istihsan up here, but there's a greater underpinning ma'na, which is always mu'tabar, it's a deeper level, we'll do ri'aya and i'tibar of that. So if there's an aib in the mabi', so you bought something, I bought something from Sheikh Yunus, I regretted, I was very despondent that I wish I could just return it, it was a mistake. I come to him, but what happened is I'm going towards him, I slip and the item's in my hand and it gets damaged. There's an aib in the sale item. Now, 5 minutes later, I present myself to him. At that moment, I've damaged the sale item. It's not in the same condition that I bought it from him yesterday. So if I was to do iqala with him now, he's going to lose out because he's accepting something where now it's deficient. There's a damage, there's a defect in the item. And we can't do ilzam of darar. The fiqh in the sharia does not do ilzam of darar upon anyone. Only when there is something that you've done and suratan it looks like a darar, but really it's not a darar. If you've done something, like it's bihaqqin, you've done something and you are now, for instance, a jinayah. You've done a jinayah and you're going to lose your hand, for instance. Or you have to pay diya, you're losing your mal. That's because it's a valid haqq. It's not although it looks like a darar, it's not really a darar. This is atonement. It's a form of cleansing for you. It's not darar, haqiqatan. In the grand scheme of things, the sharia does not deem this to be a darar. This is adl. This is adl and also rahmah, because you are being given the consequence in this world and not in the akhirah. So really it's not a darar. From the eyes of the sharia, from the sharia's perspective, we don't deem this to be a darar. Although from the worldly perspective, they'll say this is darar. That's why sharia does not impose darar upon anyone. In any mas'ala of fiqh, you will never find darar. you might see that people are losing money, paying or losing something, but you have to understand it from the greater lens. It's not a loss as far as the Sharia is concerned. Loss and benefit we understand from the lens of the Sharia, not from the lens of the world. So here we've done istihsan of iqala, but there's a greater ma'na which is underpinning, which is stronger than iqala. It's a ma'na which is across so many abwab. This then becomes a stronger ma'na, the idea of no darar at all, because darar is not permitted in any bab. And that's why we'll do ri'ayah of it even in this istihsan. We'll allow the kind of like expansion of the istihsan, or will allow a deviation from this istihsan to incorporate darar. So when there is darar, جازت الإقالة بأقل من الثمن. You can do إقالة for the difference and reduce the عيب. So you can have a discounted rate because the عيب is a مانع. We know عيب is a مانع. There's no other way to remedy this except through um, this discount. Okay? And there's another idea in fiqh which I just mentioned up here. The whole thing of إقالة being based on تسامح. Like the fuqaha, when they discuss abwab, they'll say هذا مبني على التسامح or على like mumakasa, like for bay, على التساهل. They use these words. Qadi Khan rahimahullah does this quite frequently and quite often. They use these words to indicate, to show you like what is the nature of this concept. Is there flexibility or what is this? They bring another layer and level of, they do it for all of these kafala, hawala, about how it's there to facilitate, support. They use all different types of words to make you understand the asal and the mahiyya of that thing that you're analyzing. So here we're allowing this aib to have it's mu'tabar and it'll cause a discount because of the greater meaning in fiqh, which is there's no darar allowed at all whatsoever, and that overpowers the ma'na of iqala because iqala is just level one. The idea of iqala being reversal is just a level one ma'na. This idea of darar is potentially like level three, level four. Like you can have levels of ma'an. This is like very deep. It's like a meta ma'na in which it spans across the abwab of fiqh and it has much more weight than anything else. That's why you have to do i'tibar of that. Next.
وهي فسخ في حق المتعاقدين بيع جديد في حق غيرهما عند أبي حنيفة رحمه الله تعالى.
Yeah. So now look, this is the if you follow the logic now, so they've explained to us what is iqala, what and how everything it's pure tasamuh, it remains as an iqala. However, we allow an exception of allowing a discount because of a deeper ma'na. That's what he presented. Then he goes back to defining what it is and how now we're doing ri'ayah. How do we understand iqala from the lens of the people? Because there's a haqiqah and there's a surah and a haqiqah. Suratan, anybody looks at an iqala, they see a mubadala. But as far as the parties are concerned, the ma'na of this is not a bay' and a mubadala. It's purely fasakh. So Imam Abu Hanifa says, why do we go down this route? Why do we say it's a fasakh? Aslan. Why do we say it's a fasakh and rafa? And we say it's purely a reversal. It's not a bay' and a mubadala. Because the asal in fiqh, another asal is you do i'mal al-kalam ala al-haqiqah. We'll always go with the haqiqah primarily. That is the asal, that's what's understood. To understand majaz, you need context. Majaz requires context. It requires isti'malul lafz. Haqiqa does not require any isti'mal. Haqiqa is the word itself fi nafsihi. Therefore, haqiqa is always strong because it's always there. Majaz is weaker because majaz is not always there. It requires isti'mal, it requires a context. When that's the case, haqiqa is always yaqeen. Majaz is not yaqeen, is muhtamil. It is ihtimal of this, of it being in the ma'na, if a context is found. But haqiqa is always yaqeen, is thabit, is established, because the word itself has that ma'na in it. So i'mal al-kalam al-haqiqa awla, always. And when that's the case, the ma'na of iqala is rafa and fasakh. And that's why, and another reason why there's no ihtimal of it being in the ma'na of bay is because iqala is not used majazan in the ma'na of bay. Nobody does bay with the words of iqala. Therefore, the word iqala is not used in the ma'na of bay. When it's not used in the ma'na of bay, and iqala haqiqatan means rafa' and fasakh, we have to do i'tibar of the ma'na of that word. That is following what the Shari has said. The nas from the Shari is about iqala. To really follow the Shari, we have to do i'tibar of the love, the malfooz of the Shari. And that word is that when the Shari speaks, the Shari is speaking with intent. The Shari means what they are saying. They've selected a word specifically for a ma'na in the word. So when the Shari is saying iqala, they mean iqala and what it entails. They don't mean bay or anything else. Because the Shari would not say this had it not have a particular meaning. Because the Arabic language is a very rich language. For the Shari to say iqala and to use the word iqala, it's intentional. Because the kalam of an aqil is always mu'tabar. We will do i'mal al-kalam al-aqil. We'll always do tasheeh of the kalam of an aqil. And the Shari being aqalul aqilin, the greatest. So we'll always do i'tibar of the kalam. And we'll always go with haqiqa. And iqala is not used in the ma'na of bay majazan. And when that's the case, and what other dalil do we have? Bay is for ithbat, iqala is for nafi. It's the opposite. Bay does ithbatu tamlik. Iqala does rafu tamlik. So these are two opposites. There is no correlation, connection between the two. When that's the case, iqala has no meaning of bay. When he has no meaning of bay, you can never have the majazi meaning of bay. This is how Imam Abu Hanifa sees this idea of iqala. Why he says it's fasq? Because it's completely a different ma'na to bay. However, he says, what about these third people? The question arises, why is it bay'un jadidun fi haqqi ghayrihima? How does this make sense now? Now this is where fiqh comes in. This is how like the fiqh is gained now. Why does Imam Abu Hanifa do this? Bay'un jadidun fi haqqi ghayrihima. Any idea? Anybody have any idea? Why do we do this?
Shuf'a. It's relevant in Shuf'a.
Okay, that's one of the kind of like manifestations of this ibara. But why is he saying bay'un jadidun fi haqqi ghayr? What leads him potentially to come to this conclusion? Why does he have to come to this conclusion?
Because there is a double intiqal of milk that's happening. So after the first aqd, he said that the milk did intiqal. And so for it to go back to the original owner, there has to be intiqal again. And so
Okay.
from the perspective of a third party, this is a bay' because there's tabadul of mal bil mal bil taradi.
Okay. Is there anything else to add? Like, but why does he call it bay'un jadid? You're almost there. Sheikh Abdul Samad is almost there. See, you're absolutely right. Look, there's tamlik again happening. There's real milkiya being passed. That's the truth. However, our fiqh, if you look at the larger principles of fiqh, you're still following the qiyas when it comes to this idea of tamlik. There is real tamlik happening again. But whenever there's mubadala, our fiqh across the board recognizes that as bay' ta'ati, or as a bay'. So as far as other people are concerned, for them, they are seeing the surah of a bay', a surah of a mubadala. When they are seeing surah of a mubadala, that is a ma'na which we do ri'ayah of, and it's mu'tabar in our fiqh. When it's an exchange of mabi and thaman, that surah triggers other ahkam. You're seeing a transfer of ownership. So an aqd, we will, for these third party people or these onlookers and observers, as far as they're concerned, they are seeing an aqd. As for the muta'aqidain, for them it's not an aqd, rather it's just fasq and rafa'. But because our fiqh recognizes a mubadala fi nafsihi to be a bay', we will do ri'ayah of the ma'na of the surah of a bayt as far as onlookers are concerned, and as far as the muta'aqidin are concerned, we'll make amal upon the haqiqah of what they're doing, which is fasq and rafa'. So for them, it's not a real bayt, it's purely fasq. But as far as everybody else is concerned, we are doing i'tibar of the surah, which we do i'tibar of anyway, in the rest of the fiqh, in the qiyas. And in that way, we've done jama' between, and our fiqh is now coherent. Because if you say this is not a bayt suratan for other people, Imam Abu Hanifa would have to defend his view now, why he does not do that. Because Tamlik is happening again. Suratan, there is a mubadala. So yes, for the muta'aqidin, the iqala is there, the rafa is there. But why is that not for everybody? Why are we? Because the nas is just for these two people. The iqala itself is a deviation. Iqala itself is istihsan. If we had applied this as far as everybody is concerned, you've extended the istihsan more than its limit. That's why look how strict we are with restricting the istihsan. It's purely for the two counterparties. It's not for anybody else. For everybody else, we'll follow the qiyas. The qiyas is there's a surah of a mubadala, we'll do i'tibar of this. And therefore, all the consequences of a mubadala, shuf'a, sarf, hiba, there's multiple things that the fuqaha mention up here in the shuru. But shuf'a is the famous one. You can trigger shuf'a and the party having the right of doing shuf'a now and claiming that will come as a result. Because as far as he is concerned, he's just following the qiyas of the fiqh. And the qiyas of the fiqh is when you see mubadala, you have haqq of shuf'a. So this is the reason why he says bay'un jadid, because it's now back to the qiyas. He is going, this is an example of how you limit the istihsan and how you make amal back on the qiyas as far as everybody is concerned. That's why he says amal daruri. So the idea and the word darura, it's not just about this kind of idea which we always have in our minds, which is somebody's going to die and somebody's starving, and if they don't drink this, a drop of alcohol or have a, astaghfirullah, like this pork or something, right? They'll die. This idea, this is how we think of darura. But darura is it's used in multiple ways. This is like amal daruri, like it's almost like a practical reason and a necessity to see it this way. And that is because of the fiqh as a whole. We don't mess around with the overarching usul of mu'amalat. Everything is looked at. We'll always try to make everything coherent. That's why even in qard, the fuqaha are so particular about this idea. Even in qard aslan, like the discussion of qard happens in ariya, in the bab of ariya, of borrowing. So in qard, what the fuqaha say, qard is really supposed to be not even ariya, because qard is istihlakul ayn and not baqa'ul ayn. Ariya is baqa'ul ayn. Intifa' bil ayn bi baqa'il ayn. That's ariya. Qard is istihlakul ayn. You're doing istihlak, you're demolishing darahim and nanir of food. You're consuming it, you're using it, you're spending it. That's why the fuqaha move away from the word ariya and they move to the word qard. And now, asal in ariya is you do raddul ayn. In qard, you do raddul mithal. You have to give the mithal back. But the fuqaha now do i'tibar. They say, look, really it's tabarru. But because you're giving not the same thing, you're giving a mithal. That's why ibtida'an the fuqaha say qard is tabarru. Intihan, what do the fuqaha say about qard? Who knows? What is it? Intiha'an. Anybody?
Mu'awada.
Exactly, mashallah, right? It's mu'awada. They say it's mu'awada. But how can that be? Because if you're saying it's mu'awada, then isn't it supposed to be riba nasi'ah? Because here it's a money for money transaction. With nasa, there's delay. But that is, they're only doing this because the riba will not happen because it's tabarru, ibtida'an. So there is no riba. Intiha'an, when you give them money back, they're saying it's a mu'awada suratan. It's tabarru haqiqatan and ma'nan. Because there's a mubadala. So the reason why they say that is because being congruent and coherent with the overall principles of mu'amalat. That's why. So even there, and this happens over and over again, they will always, because if you don't make that, if you don't do that, and you don't interpret it in that way, then you will be messing around with a muttafaq alay asal in our fiqh. That when you see a mu'awada or mubadala, it's a bay, or it's a mu'awada. If it is a mubadala, it's a mu'awada. And then you have to start creating exceptions. And creating exceptions, it's okay, but it has to be justified. You can't just keep creating exceptions. Otherwise, the asal no longer remains an asal. What's the point if an asal doesn't remain an asal? So that's why the fuqaha are very particular about everything adding up and making sense. And always like having no loose ends. That's the best way to think about it. There should be no loose ends in your fiqh. That's why when you're explaining a mas'ala ever, or you're working on a mas'ala, always do your mas'ala in a way there's no loose ends. You've answered everything. Every ishkal that comes, you've answered it. And that's when you can say your fiqh is coherent. If there's inconsistency in your fiqh, that means there's inconsistency in your argument, your fiqh is wrong. There can't be inconsistency. If there's an asal going against your fiqh, you have to now respond. You have to make sure it matches up. If you can't defend, then you've lost your argument, or your asal is wrong, your understanding is incorrect. And that's how fiqh itself regulates itself. This is a way to understand fiqh. Fiqh itself regulates itself. You don't need another regulator. So if you're working as a mutafaqih and as a student, then the fiqh itself will regulate you, because you now need to work within the parameters set by the fuqaha, and you need to, it's a minefield. You have to make sure you're not breaking any asal. You are fulfilling every principle mentioned by the fuqaha, and now you're coming to a natija and an outcome. And that's how fiqh regulates itself. Because if you can't navigate that minefield, you're incorrect. Okay. Next.
وهلاك الثمن لا يمنع صحة الإقالة.
Yeah, so this is, again, look, fine, iqala is istihsan khilaf al-qiyas as far as the idea of rafa and fasl is concerned. But where are we taking everything else from? What do we call upon? The qiyas of bay that we've learnt. And the qiyas that we've learnt and established is thaman is never muta'ayyan. It's never the asal. It's just a wasila. It's a wasita. The asal is the mabi. And thaman is never muta'ayyan. So even if the thaman itself was destroyed, it doesn't matter. Because now the thaman has come into your ownership. It's just a mithli thing. That's what it is. The money that you have are just tokens. What you really own is this kind of invisible amount in your kind of like invisible balance sheet that you own. And this is money is just not muta'ayyan. It's never muta'ayyan. These are just representations of what you own in your kind of milkiya, which is in your dhimma, which is invisible anyway. So halakut thaman doesn't matter at all. That's the asal in bay. Then
وهلاك المبيع يمنع من صحتها.
yeah, but then the asal of bay also is that the sale item is the asal. That is the qiyas. Again, we're just going back to the qiyas now. So as far as iqala is concerned, then the key ideas of iqala, we do the istihsan. Everything else is just the qiyas that we know already. So halakul mabi yamnu min sihatiha, like in every other masala of bay. If you have a mabi which is destroyed, everything drops, because that is the asal. The aqd is based upon the mabi. That is the core. That is everything. That is the asal. It's the mabi. The thaman is just a wasila. That's why the mabi and items, that's why even this discussion that we have in contemporary times of money not being a commodity, money being a medium of exchange, money being a means. It's all from these nusus that we have in these texts. Really, it's mabi. The money is not the asal. Mabi is the asal. Why? Because utility and nafa is gained from nafsul mabi. With the mabi itself, you can do production, you can do consumption. And with that, there's economic growth, there's development. The Islamic system is production based. It's always based on production. Production and producing goods, services, assets is what grows an economy. Consumption doesn't have any growth, rather, it can be negative. It can take away from growth. The riba system is based on consumption, just about consuming. The Islamic system is based on production. That's why mabi mal is the asal, because for something to be mal, it has to have utility, nafa'. It has to be something which is beneficial. It has to have tamawul. And only when something has utility can it be used for beneficial outcomes. And it's that beneficial outcome which actually spurs production. And production has an economic impact upon, or an economic growth and gain for the entire society and community. So the asal is the mabi. It's all about the mabi. It's the mabi that adds value. It's the mabi that adds benefit. It's the mabi that fulfills the needs of people, or it can be used to, it can be put into production. Money alone cannot do anything. That's why if you do a business and you're just changing money around, there's no production. There's nothing that's being produced. The only time you can have more money is riba. That's why why is riba called a ziyada? Lughatan, riba means ziyada, because the ziyada is coming from nothing. In riba, the ziyada comes from nothing. There's no production whatsoever. It's only somebody charging you money on top. Where is that money? It's purely a debt now you owe. So riba is this invisible, fake ziyada that comes. By just playing around with money, there's no production as such. But think about if you have mabi, you have goods, you put goods together, or you have a piece, a log of wood. You can make that wood into items which can be used for multiple other things. And those things can then be used for other things. So just a normal sale item, metal, wood, other goods, other assets, they can be used for production to create more value. You can create more value. And that's where the growth is gained, because these goods now demand a greater value in the market because of the utility. There's more demand for this, the price will be naturally higher. There's a meaningful difference in the sale item. It's gone through a supply chain. But if you think about the opposite of money, money is not doing anything, it's just remaining in its same form. There's been no production. You can't fulfill any need with money. So even if I give you money and I charge you £100 on top, for instance, and we just left the money there, there's nothing happening whatsoever. But I'm gaining without any production. Me as a lender, or just take a non-Muslim as a lender, if they're lending with interest, they are gaining without any production. There might be no production whatsoever, yet they've made a gain. Where is that gain going to come from? That money might not even exist in the market. If you think about a very classical market where money was limited or minted and mined, where is it coming from? It's not there. It's just purely a debt that's owed. So riba is an artificial increase. That's why it's ziyada. It's an artificial increase. Zakat also means numu and ziyada, but that's a haqiqi increase. That's the difference between these two words, riba and zakat. Zakat is also ziyada, but haqiqatan it is an increase. Although your eyes tell you it's a decrease, but from the lens of the shari, haqiqatan is an increase. Riba, although haqiqatan you see it as an increase, but hukman, it's better to put it that way, that zakat is haqiqatan a decrease, but hukman is an increase. Riba haqiqatan from your eyes perspective, it's an increase, but hukman is a decrease. From the shari's perspective, it's a decrease, and that's the asal. It's a decrease. It's not adding any value. Okay? And therefore, فَإِنْ هَلَكَ بَعْضُ الْمَبِي جَازَتِ الْإِقَالَةِ فِي الْبَاقِي. And that's also the asal. Since the mabi is the asal, the badal is commensurate to the asal. And so when بعض الْمَبِي has been destroyed, the principle is you'll only then have right to the proportionate amount. Because then if you demand more, that demand is unjustified. And that's why you can only do iqala and take a refund proportionate to how much the mabi is existing. Okay, that's clear. Any questions on that? No? Okay, next bab. Murabah. You should have this. I don't know if this. I shared this with Mufti Mu'assab quite late, so I'm not sure if it's on your portal or if you have it with you. But this is Murabaha now. Murabaha and Tawliya. This bab now, it's a different bab. it's moving away from what we've been discussing earlier. What we've been discussing earlier is all about the mabi, the mabi, that's the asl. So the fuqaha mentioned everything we discussed previously was to do with the asl of a bayt, which was the mabi. We talked about being a bayt sahih, lazim, fasid. We spoke about iqala because iqala rests upon the existence of the mabi. But now we're going towards discussions of thaman and things that are about to do with the actual thaman. And murabah and tawliya is the first discussion. Then riba will come next. What is murabaha? So the fuqaha mentioned, like I think up here, where is this? Perhaps this is in Tuhfat al-Fuqaha, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It's in actually multiple books. This it's even in Badai. Obviously, it's going to be in Badai if it's in Tuhfat al-Fuqaha, but it's in other books as well. How, as far as the pricing is concerned, and disclosing the price and referencing the cost price, there's different ways to term a sale and to describe a sale. So if you are not disclosing the initial cost price, you'll call it musawama. It's just a musawama. There's no reference to the. So I bought something, I'm selling it to you. I've not mentioned the cost price. That's a musawama. If I mention the cost price and I'm selling it to you with a disclosed profit margin, that's a murabaha. If I'm selling it to you at the very cost price that I bought it at, so I bought it at £10, I'm selling it to you at £10, that's tawliya. If I am selling it to you with a discount, so I bought it for £10, I'm selling it to you for £5, that's wadi'ah. There's another thing where the fuqaha call ishraq, which is not many of us, we don't really like read this or are familiar with this, but it's بيع التولية في بعض المبيع من النصف والثلث وغير ذلك. So you're just adding a partner almost. You're selling part of it. You're just doing ishraq in the bay. Okay. Now, what is the asl of murabaha? That's the next discussion. What is the asl of what is murabaha? Murabaha was this idea where you had people who had no time to go and look in the market and find find the best bargain, because in the bargaining, haggling is the norm in markets. You need to go and be smart and get the best price. So a person who was smart had the time and luxury to go around and do shopping and ask different people and to kind of get the best deal and best price. That's fine, and that's what normal people would do. But sometimes some people, they're not interested in that. They have shortage of time, or maybe they are not savvy enough. Maybe they are not articulate enough to be able to negotiate and to get the best deal. Now, for them, there's this idea of murabaha that comes in, where the person selling to them says, look, this is I'm disclosing my price, cost price. I'm selling you on murabaha terms. And this person is i'timad. Like, okay, fine. Is this your profit? I'm happy with the profit you're making. I don't need to go now to every other shop and find out the actual best price. I'm happy with your disclosure, what you've said to me. I trust your word. You've disclosed this on murabaha terms now. With this disclosure, I buy this item from you with a 10% margin. That's the discussion of murabaha, where there's a disclosure of the initial cost price. And the margin is also then known. That's what that is murabaha, to help people. And that's why the fuqaha call it's mabni al amana. Murabaha min buyu' al amana. It's based on amana, in that there's trust. Naturally, there's a trust in the from the counterparties. The buyer is trusting the seller and of his disclosure. That is what murabaha is and what's happening. And I'll just put some text up here which show the idea of murabaha as well, right? So you can in your notes it's mentioned there. What are the conditions of murabaha? See, murabaha is very different. Murabaha is this trust-based sale. So now there's extra conditions. It's not only a bait. Because you've used the word murabaha, and there's an added qualification in the contract of murabaha, of amana. What is the actual shart is of amana and being honest and truthful. Therefore, it changes the sifa, or it adds additional sifat to the aqd. So in addition to all your principles of bay, there's some additional requirements to adhere to the rules of murabaha. So for instance, these are like the conditions that we have, like about 5 core conditions. أن يكون الثمن الأول معلوما للمشتري. الثاني, you need to know the sale price. That is the basis, the cost price upon which the profit margin is applied. So the mushtari needs to know in the murabaha sale the actual cost price initially, so he can then determine whether he's getting a good deal or a bad deal. Likewise, the ribh needs to be known. The ra'sul mal in the initial transaction, so let's use the language leg 1 and leg 2. The first sale is leg 1, the second sale is leg 2. In leg 1, the thaman has to be min dhawat al-amthal. It has to be mithli. Your darahim, your dananir, and so on and so forth. These are all mithliyat. That is a requirement, and we'll discuss why and everything later on. Another one is the first aqd, it can't be between ribawi items, because if you are now doing murabaha, it can then become riba. So it can't be مقابلا بجنسه من أموال الربا. That's another requirement, as the fuqaha mentioned. And finally, أن يكون العقد الأول صحيحا. The first aqd has to be sahih, because you can't do bina of a murabaha upon a fasid contract, because in a fasid contract, the thaman is not binding. This is the reason why. Thaman is not binding, rather you're doing rad and you're going then to qima. So you can't do bina upon the thaman. That's why the first aqd has to be sahih. So those are like the conditions of the bab itself, and this is all going to be discussed anyway. But what are the usul of this bab? Like the key fiqhi usul are determining all the fiqh in this bab. So there's quite a few. As I mentioned up here, this is the key asal. الأصل في بيع المرابحة أنه مبني على الأمانة. This is فيجب صيانته عن حقيقة الخيانة وشبهتها. This is the number one principle in murabaha. The asal is مبني على الأمانة فيجب صيانته عن حقيقة الخيانة وشبهتها. You have to stay away from khiyana, its haqiqa and its shubha. If there's any shubha of khiyana, then you have to do, it's wajib to do tanazzuh and to stay away from this. So that's why there's an added meaning. In normal bay, the shubha is not mu'tabar. Here, because it's murabaha, you've added an additional ma'na. You've added the ma'na of amana. It's an added ma'na in the aqd. Therefore, you have to take the added ma'na of shubha as well. In normal uqud, we only do i'tibar of the haqiqa. Yes, in riba, because riba is a prohibition, we do i'tibar of riba and its shubha. But in other matters, we only do i'tibar of the haqiqa. Unless you go into fasad and anything to do with riba and fasid, there's a discussion of the shubha that comes in typically. But up here, because you're adding an additional ma'na, which is of murabaha, you've added a ma'na, and therefore you have to do ri'ayah for an additional ma'na, which is a shubha. That's how shubha is coming in from a fiqh perspective. And therefore, as you can see up here as well, مبناها على الأمانة لأن المشتري يأتمن البائع في خبره معتمدا على قوله فيجب على البائع التنزه عن الخيانة والتنجب عن الكذب لئلا يقع المشتري في غرور. So this is like the key idea in murabaha. So the first asal is all the qiyas of mu'awada apply with an additional condition of amana and honesty. Amana and honesty are an explicit condition in the contract of murabaha. Therefore, it must be observed. Deception, misrepresentation must be abstained from, whether this is haqiqa or shubha, as we discussed earlier. Then, this is the third principle you'll see playing out in the fiqh. Urf determines which expenses can be added. The urf is developed based on market practice and pricing conventions amongst businesses. والمعنى الذي اعتمد عليه من اعتبار عادات التجار في المواضع كلها ونعم المواضع كلها, right? This idea of doing i'tibar of the adat of the tujar, because there's a discussion in murabaha of what can you add to the cost price. So if I bought something for £10, am I allowed to add additional things or not? Like for instance, the delivery, the cost of delivery, the cost of perhaps labeling the items, or the cost of packing the items. Can I add that to my price and then raise the cost price to £15 and start murabaha from £15 upwards? Start my profit margin from £15 upwards. Or can I not do i'tibar of that? Which prices or which expenses can I add when pricing the cost price? That's the discussion up there. And hence the fuqaha mentioned up here. There's couple of like, our fuqaha have a debate around this idea. There's different principles mentioned by the fuqaha, but really it all comes down to the idea of urf, the adat of the tujar. Whatever they do i'tibar of and whatever they typically add becomes mu'tabar. But for something to become an urf and practice and an adat of tujar, there's certain things that have to happen. So it seems like the fuqaha, when they're discussing the idea, different fuqaha are looking at different things, but they're all leading up to one thing. And we'll discuss that. The next al-asal in the Abi Hanifa rahimahullah, an al-amana sifatun lil-aqdi. That amana is not nafsul thaman. It's a sifa of the thaman or sifa of the aqd. Or shart fil aqd. It's like this idea, it's an extrinsic thing. The idea of amana, because a discussion will happen in this bab. When you're doing a murabaha, where is the idea of amana sitting? Is it just a clause in the contract? Or is it intrinsically part of the thaman? That the thaman fi nafsihi has this idea of having amana within it. And therefore, when there's no amana and it's khiyana, then haqiqatan you have to reduce the price. So this is another discussion. Where does amana sit? That the fuqaha have this debate and discussion. The next asal in this bab, which will play out repeatedly towards the end, is al-awsaf la yuqabiluha shay'un min al-thaman ma lam takun maqsudatan bil-itlafi li'annaha atba'un. This is another asal in our fiqh. Awsaf, things which are awsaf, which are not part of the thaman and the mabi. These awsaf, they're additions, they're extra, you could say they're extrinsic to the core and the arkan. Then لا يقابلها شيء من الثمن. These awsaf to the mabi or these awsaf in the aqd, the price is not against that, and therefore if there's khiyana, then لا يقابلها شيء من الثمن. Or if there's talaf and halak of a mabi, or there's some aib, then as long as there's no itlaf, then it will potentially be overlooked, as we'll see. Another asal in this bab is لا يجوز إخراج العقد عن موضوعه. When a contract is signed as a murabaha and you change the terms to such a level where it is no longer a murabaha, rather it becomes a wadi'a, or it becomes a tawliya, or you signed a tawliya and it's become a murabaha, our fuqaha will not do i'tibar of that ma'na. Our fuqaha will say you've changed the aqd from its mawdu'. You've completely changed the aqd. Your love was murabaha and now you've made it into a tawliya. There is no you can't do i'tibar of that now. You have to make sure it remains as a murabaha, because that is the asal up here. We will go with the haqiqa of the muta'aqidain, what they're saying. They want to do the ma'na of murabaha. They are not using murabaha in the ma'na of wadi'a, because murabaha is not used majazan as in the ma'na of wadi'a, and therefore to keep the aqd as it is as a murabaha, it is not permissible to move it away from murabaha. Likewise, if it's a tawliya, and the tawliya you change the terms in such a way, or this khiyana afterwards, which makes it into a murabaha, we'll say it's not valid. You have to make it back into a tawliya, because that is the overarching idea of this contract. Because the asl according to our imams is لا يجوز إخراج العقد عن موضوعه, in as far as this murabaha is concerned. And then finally, the last asl, which is an asl we've discussed before, is al-aslu anna sa'ati al-majlis ka sa'atin wahida lidaf al-haraj. And this istihsani idea that the majlis is deemed to be one, regardless of when you decide something, when you discuss something, as long as you two people are together, even if it's after the aqd, but they're still together, it's all deemed to be just one moment, and everything has been discussed in that one instance, and everything has been agreed in that one instance. That's how we will determine and deem that particular transaction. So these are the key principles which are running in this bab of Murabaha. Just to point out here, you might have heard of Murabaha in Islamic finance today. That's completely different to this. That's the reality. The Murabaha that takes place in contemporary times, it's a Murabaha based on this idea of disclosing the cost price. That's the kind of similarity between classical Murabaha and contemporary Murabaha. But as we've discussed earlier, the classical Murabaha and the classical Uqud were actually trades and transactions and trading. It was actual trading. It was normal trading that people do in the markets. Today's Murabaha and today's contracts in Uqud, as far as financing is concerned, they are financing. Financing are not the same as trading. These are different types of contracts. Financing has its own profile, its risk return profile. It has its own requirements, own objectives, different goals. Trading, as a trader, you have different goals, different objectives, different risks, different return profiles. Everything's different. So although they're using murabaha on both sides, classical in the fiqh it says murabaha, don't think that today's contemporary stuff, murabaha, is entirely the same. That if you read the chapter of murabaha, you'll understand what they're doing in there. You'll understand as far as the disclosure of pricing is concerned. That's where the similarity is. But because this is financing, financing is about extending credit, it changes the entire sifa of the muamala. The entire contract changes because now, by its very nature, a contemporary murabaha will have ta'jeel. There will be tawthiq, like you'll have rahan, kafala, or guarantors, and all these things in place. You'll have ziyada in the thaman, of course. That's the idea. You want to have a markup. So there's all these different things. It's always mu'ajjal, and it's done for pure profit purposes, where the financer just wants a return. Up here in the classical murabaha it's business. It's typically not mu'ajjal. It can be mu'ajjal, but rarely is it described in that way. It's a proper trade, where the idea is I'm trading in this. I'm trading in this. I'm the buyer initially, I'm supplying it in the market, and I'm selling this. In the contemporary murabaha, the Islamic banks and Islamic institutions which are doing Islamic financing are not traders. However, the fiqh makes them into traders. This is the tension. This is where there's tension in Islamic finance. And this is why there's always these debates that happen. Because the fiqh pushes the banking institutions to be more like traders, whereas regulation, market practice, convention, tax law, legal requirements push the banks to act like financiers and take least risk. So it's this tension between these two opposites. That's why you have hiyal come in. And that's why you have structures developed to cater for and facilitate this contextual reality that we have, where we want the Sharia, we want to create alternative products with riba, but yet within the constraints that we have. And that's why we do all these different things and we make it work from a Sharia perspective to make sure that riba is abstained from, all the prohibitions are abstained from. Yet we've developed something that can work, but it's not the same as your murabaha that you read in the book. It might not always be the same. And that's why even in the murabaha that you have in the banks, the bank is not the business, it's not a business person in assets or anything. It's purely a financer. It deals with money and financing. That is its role. But then we're making it get ownership. That's why the contracts are different, because we're forcing it from a Sharia perspective to now have some kind of milkiya. So now you'll either use a trust that's declared on an asset. The bank will have legal title to the asset, but then we'll create a trust where the bank has beneficial ownership and the customer has beneficial ownership. And they will start saying there's actually a musharaka as far as the beneficial ownership is concerned. We'll make sure the bank bears some risk. We'll push some other risks onto the customer so that it becomes sustainable for the bank, and long term, the bank can continue and operate as a business. We'll make sure that the customer, because he wants the property at the end, We want to make sure that the bank sells the property to him. So we'll put in a wa'ad there perhaps. So these other things are added on to make sure that the purpose of financing is fulfilled, yet the requirements of Sharia are also fulfilled. So that's the difference between Murabaha classical and Murabaha contemporary. And then the next point up here is just the architecture of this bab. This is how the bab will be presented. The bab will first talk about definitions to you. It'll give you a breakdown of different definitions. Then it'll give you the conditions of a murabaha. Then it'll give you expenses and computing the cost base. How do we work out the actual cost price? What prices or expenses can you add on to the cost price? There'll be a discussion on that. We'll look at gross profit and net profit considerations. Then we'll also look at, okay, what if you breach the condition of amana? What are the consequences of that? What if there's some shubuhat? Because remember, we have added this ma'na of murabaha and amana. Then you have to do i'tibar of shubuhat. So which shubuhat are there? And how do we do ri'ayah and i'tibar of those shubuhat? They'll give you case studies. For instance, they'll talk about back-to-back sales. That's one shubha. Then there's another shubha. What if you're trading with your own slaves, your own servants, your own thing, which I just call companies, because this is a contemporary way of thinking about it. So trading with your own companies or your own slaves. Or you're trading with your own assets. You have a mudarib who has your assets. What if you trade with your own mudaraba pool? How does that work? And then finally, the last discussion is, what if there's a defect between the first leg and the second leg? So you've done as a trader, you've went and bought an item for £10. I will sell it tomorrow to Sheikh Yunus for £15. But in the interim at night time, what happened is a defect came in the sale item. That defect can come naturally or it can come intentionally. I did something. Now, what are the consequences of both defects and how does that impact the overall operation of a murabaha? So this is everything that you're going to look at and we're going to discuss in the bab. As you can see, it's a very logical, very systematic way to understand the bab. Sheikh Yunus, back to you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. باب المرابحة والتولية. المرابحة نقل ما ملكه بالعقد الأول بالثمن الأول مع زيادة ربح.
Yeah, look how particular and precise the fuqaha are. نقل ما ملكه بالعقد الأول. Not نقل ما اشترى بالعقد الأول. ما ملكه You know, in fiqh is typically very purposeful. The fuqaha are very purposeful. When they write a word, that's why in the classical, these mukhtasarat, there's a skill with mukhtasarat. When they write and do ikhtisar, yes, there's ikhtisar and sometimes it needs more sharh, no doubt, like guns and these things. There's some like even like a Darar al-Mukhtar and these books. Sometimes the ikhtisar can be like mukhil lil-fahm. But many a time the ikhtisar still, they're giving you enough meaning there for you to extract and withdraw. There's enough there for you to, it's not just a mukhtasar and it's meaningless. So for instance, even Darar al-Mukhtar, it's not meaningless. No, there's ma'na, there's fahm, but it's not always easily understood, accessible, or a person can reach a conclusion which is not tam. And if you don't consult or if you've not read other books, then you will leave with a deficient understanding. Remember, when the fuqaha write these books, they expect you to have, like the Hashif ibn Abidin. When you're reading the Hashif ibn Abidin, you're expected to have read all the other books to understand, because he's just using rumuz here and there and everywhere. And he's quoting the Bahar, he's quoting this, he's quoting Tahtawi, he's quoting all these different books. And he just quotes some of the passages. You're expected to have read all these things before. You're coming to the Hashia of Ibn Abidin, rahimahullah. You're expected to have at least had exposure to all these different works. And he's building up his argument. He'll just quote from here, and just put an argument, وَأَقُولُ وَقُلْتُ, and then intaha. Like, you know, just put his own thing. And هذا ظاهر الكلام. Or he just mentions these pointers, but he expects you to have understood the core arguments from before. So that's why isti'ab of the books of fiqh is extremely, extremely important. And reading different mutun, mu'tabara, and going through everything and have this kind of like connection in the books of fiqh. Read the books of fiqh, understand. So every bab, take it, read it from just chronologically from the books. Start with al-asl and keep reading all the way there. Then you see it'll take a long time. If you just do one bab, you'll see how much you benefit from just one bab from that exercise, because now you can trace and understand who said what, who added what, where it's come from, which ideas come from, which faqih, which mujtahid. Is it from the imams of the madhab, or is it a takhrij, later takhrij, or is it a qawl of somebody? Who said it? Why have they said it? What was it, a fatwa of somebody? And how does that then impact the overall qawl in the madhab? This kind of evolution of an opinion is really powerful, because then you start understanding the fiqh of the fuqaha. Like there's so many masail which will change potentially, or there's uyud added as we go along. Or there's other, like for instance, today I was teaching in the morning the mas'ala of i'an al-ma'siyah, very famous mas'ala. And we're just talking about how the idea of like this bait, if you lease a house to for ma'bad, or you do for a kanisa or a ma'bad of the Yahud or a temple. And in those discussions, there's a description of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and what he says and why he says Sahibain and everybody. But there's fatwa of Al-Walwaliji, right? In his fatawa. Then his opinion comes in. How he gives fatwa now on these calls, and how he goes with like the qawl of like Sahibain, but he does ri'ayah of another ma'na. And he mentions this. So there's like looking at these fatawa and how the fuqaha are understanding these principles from our imams is extremely beneficial. So coming back to the kitab, نقل ما ملكه بالعقد الأول. Whatever the first transaction was, بالثمن الأول, however you received the price at that time, مع زيادة ربح. This is what it is. So murabahah is about selling, it's naql. What you've gained from the first contract, you're selling it in the second contract, مع زيادة ربح بالثمن الأول. So you're doing rib upon the first thaman. And that's why you'll see that the thaman has to be mithli, as we'll discuss. And tawliya is the same idea, but there's min ghairi ziyadati ribin. There is no profit whatsoever. In tawliya, it's the same. So I'm doing naqal, I'm transferring, transmitting it, or forwarding the item for the same price without any rib. And then
ولا تصح المرابحة والتولية حتى يكون العوض مما له مثل.
Yeah. So the next principle is that murabahah and tawliya are not valid unless the first thing or the first price has a mithal. Now, why would that be the case? Why are the fuqaha saying that? What do you think? Why would the fuqaha say this? So what are they saying? They're saying, remember, there's two legs to a transaction, leg one and leg two in a murabaha. Leg one is the first aqd. The payment that's used in there has to be something which is mithli. So I can't use something which is qimi. I can't pay using an animal, because animals are qimiyat. But I can use darahim and dinanir. Why is that the case? What would the reason be here?
Because you can't replicate it.
What do you mean by that?
If it's a murabaha, then there has to be excess. If it's a tawliya, then it has to be identical, and you won't be able to make it identical, or you won't be able to know if there is an excess.
Yeah, well done. Exactly that, right? If you want to know if there's excess, you have to be able to compare. If it's a different jins, or if it's something which is qimi, you can't objectively know the price, because in qimiyat, prices are purely subjective. So if you have, for instance, an animal, okay, maybe now we have a convention where you can grade animals precisely based on things, but still, animals by their very nature have multiple variables. They're qimiyat. And each variable then becomes a unique item, so to speak. That's why, the mashayikh will always say this, that why were the Anbiya shepherds? Because every animal is a qimi thing. Each sheep is qimi. It's completely unique with its own set of variables and characteristics and personality trait. And if you graze and you look after these animals, and you're looking after every single animal, and you're making a bond with each animal and getting that trust of the animal, and looking after the animal, then that will allow you and build a sifat within the Anbiya of then with humans, because they were working with humans, and humans have even more variables. Every human being is separate, is full of different personality traits and emotions and intentions. So that's why these are all qimiyat. That's where the idea of qimiyat comes from, right? From this is just like a faida. But so if we're using an animal to pay, if we're using an animal to pay in the first sale, how can you compare it in the second, in the murabaha? This price is subjective. And remember, in murabaha, not only do you have to say haqiqatan from khiyana, you have to also say from the shubha of khiyana, because of the additional condition of murabaha. So because there's a shubha, what's the shubha? The shubha in using a qimi thing is, from one angle, yes, you got a musamma. But the other angle, the other shubha is, really it's not the price, because this is purely subjective. There's no objective way to determine this. Whereas when you're using a mithli thing, everybody can say the price was actually 15 for this. It's objectively, the thaman is set as this. This is how much is bought for in the market. It has something available in the market. But a Kimi thing always rests upon the counterparties, how they define this. And every single thing will be very different in its own essence. So you can't really get it with certainty that this is the actual price. Okay. Next.
ويجوز أن يضيف إلى رأس المال أجرة القصار والصبغ والطراز والفتل وأجرة حمل الطعام، ويقول قام علي بكذا ولا يقول اشتريته بكذا.
Yeah. So this is now, so we've finished the definition, we've understood what it is. This is now where the pricing convention starts. How do you price a murabaha or the expenses? Now, in the kitab, it's saying you can add to the Rasul Mal the ujra of all these different activities, to cloths, to dyeing it, to changing it, to like the hamal of the ta'am, and all these different activities are done with the cloth. Now, our fuqaha discuss that what is the asal up here? Is the asal, some fuqaha went on this explanation, the asal is whatever adds or is a ziyada in the mabi, like for instance, dyeing. It's a ziyada to the mabi, to dye. You can add that cost of that to the sale item because it's caused haqiqatan a ziyada. That's an agreed upon ma'na by the fuqaha. Another ma'na is, okay, it might not be a haqiqi ziyada, but it can be a ma'nan ziyada. What does ma'na ziyada mean? For instance, that's why they mentioned hamlu ta'am. The ta'am is the same. You haven't changed the sifa of the ta'am at all. But because you've moved it from one location to another location, maybe in this new location, there is an increase in its value because you've taken it to a market. So you've changed it from one location to another location. That increases the price. When that's increased the price, you can add that cost as well to the base price. So the cost of because this particular activity is having an impact on the underlying price, it's good enough to connect it to the sale item, and therefore you can add that expense on to the sale item. So this is one way our fuqaha have debated this idea and discussed this idea. Now, there's some other fuqaha. Well, they say no, it's not just about what's mu'athir in al-ma'qud alayh. It's not about what is ta'thir in the ma'qud alayh. Rather, the asl is whatever the adat of the tujjar is, and whatever they add. So Karhi has a very nice long discussion on this. Atqani discusses very nicely. In Tuhfa it's also been discussed. So if you look at the classical books of fiqh, Majma' has a very nice discussion. It's also in Hidayah, just about this idea of qima and how qima is increased by hamal and different makan. There's multiple discussions on this in the classical fuqaha. The kind of like what everybody comes to is this idea of whatever in urf actually is deemed to be part of the sale item. Because what is the asl the fuqaha trying to get at? The asl is we can't have any shubha, right? And neither can we have haqiqi khiyana, neither can we have shubha khiyana. So we're trying to stay away from any khiyana altogether. So when we're disclosing the cost price, haqiqi khiyana is to say, uh, this item, it was for £10, but you've added your expenses and you say, oh yeah, I bought it for £15. That's why they say ويقول قام علي بكذا ولا يقول اشتريته بكذا. That is حقيقة خيانة. So we will stay away from that always. But what's shubha of the khiyana? There's a shubha of khiyana which is because now this is where the shubha comes in. From one angle, remember shubha is always about angles. Whenever you talk about shubha, it's like one side is this i'tibar and another side is the opposite i'tibar. That's what we mean by shubha always. So shubha, from one i'tibar, you're adding all these different costs which are not really the cost price of the item. So from that angle, we should not be adding. But another angle is again, now this is istihsan. This is like, that's why those fuqaha would say that it's making a ziyada in the asal or the ain. They're saying it's tabi' to the ain. That's the asl that really it goes down to. Other fuqaha saying it's not about tabi' and being matbu', rather it's purely about urf. The urf decides what is part of the sale item. Although haqiqatan it's not part of the sale item, urfan it is part of the sale item. So you see we're doing an istihsan up here. So how do we add expenses? And that's why the bina of this is on urf, which is the istihsan. It's purely an istihsani discussion. How do we understand which expenses to add and then to say qama alayya bikada? Because we're staying away from the haqiqi khiyana, which is to say I bought it for this much. That you can't do at all. That's haqiqi. But shubha is there's an angle of you did spend all of this amount of money. That's the reality. So from that, there is no shubha. But there's another shubha of that really it's not the cost price of the sale item. These are additional expenses. So how do the fuqaha do ri'ayah of both of these shibhain or these shubhas that we have, right? Is you go in the middle and you say qama alayya bikada. So you are staying away from khiyana. You're doing i'tibar of a real ma'na, which is urfan, is mu'tabar, is tabi'. It has weight. It's something which is an istihsan which the fuqaha didn't i'tibar of. And so we say qama alayya bikada. So we stayed away from infringing the rules of murabaha, but yet we have done i'tibar of the urf as well. Now, so the question arises, how do we then actually operationalize this? And what are we actually doing? And this is more like from a business perspective now. So when you're buying and selling something, one is a cost price. One is the cost price. So for instance, I buy something for £10, a pen. Let's take an example of a pen. It cost me £10. There might be shipping costs in there. There might be some other costs in there. Packaging costs, shipping costs. There might be some other, I might have to pay some tax, for instance. These are all costs connected to the sale item. This is one ma'na the fuqaha give. It's tabi or it's connected to the sale item, meaning it's either doing ziyada or it's bringing the pen to me, and those costs are bringing the pen to a different area, a different market, a different arena of transacting. I can now add those costs to the sale item. I can say because of these expenses, it cost me just say £5, but the cost price of the pen was £10. If I go and sell now, I'll say qama alayya bikada £15. So I've added the expenses. The cost price is 10, expense is 5. Now from 15 onwards, I'll do the murabaha. So from a business perspective, what are you doing? You're covering your cost price, or the cost with the £10. That's your cost. The 15 is covering your what's known as like your direct costs of the item. So from an accounting perspective, if you look at an income statement or a profit and loss account, so there's three famous financial statements. You have your balance sheet, you have your statement of cash flows, and then you have your what we call P&L, your profit and loss account, or you call your income statement. In America, they use the word income statement. In your income statement or your profit and loss account, typically how it looks like is, and perhaps it'd be good if I showed you this, but maybe I can show you this next week. This idea of how, if you have just one item, You start at the top. So your income statement will show revenue at the top. So it's a table, but revenue, that's how much is coming in. Then you have your cost of goods sold, your COGS, what's known as COGS in accounting convention. That's the direct costs in selling this particular item. And then you have your other costs, for instance, your labor cost and inventory cost and other things. Then you have your indirect costs, which are your overheads. Then you have your operational expenses, your capex, your capital expenses. You have your gross profit. You have your net profit. Right? There's multiple levels and layers, and then you have tax. You can have other fields as well. You can have earnings before tax, like your EBITDA. You can have like where appreciation is removed, and then you at the bottom is your net profit. So there's a multiple ways or multiple, you could say, thresholds by determining your profit. Coming back to the classical murabaha, your top line is like your overall cost. So if I sold a pen for, let's say, £20, my revenue is £20. I'm allowed to deduct, obviously, the cost of that item, which was £10. So I've deducted £10, plus £5 is expenses. So my profit is really in the remaining £5. That's my remaining profit, the £5, because that's over and above the expenses. Now, when a business is operating, it needs to cover all its expenses. Can I, in my murabaha, cover completely unrelated costs? For instance, I'm selling you in murabaha terms. Can I incorporate the expenses of my license? To run a business, I need a license. Can I incorporate that in my murabaha, in that sale? Is that a valid something which is mu'tabar in this, and something that which can be ascribed to the item? Can I add, for instance, the rent that I'm paying on my property in the murabaha or not? Can I add staff costs? Can I add I have to pay to the government, for instance, just say national insurance. Well, that's separate anyway. Just say there's another fee I need to pay, a penalty. Yeah, just like a penalty. I delayed my tax payment, so I was charged what they call interest, but really it's like a penalty. I'm being penalized by them for delaying in payment. Can I add that in there? So if it's not directly connected or often used in an item, then the qama alayya bikadha cannot capture those payments because they're completely unrelated to the sale item. But then the question arises, how do you then pay for those costs? Those costs then are captured in your kind of like profit element or after your qama alayya bikadha. Because if £10 was the cost of the item, the £5 was the direct costs of this item, and I've charged £5 extra, that £5, not all of that will go in my pocket. A normal business, its markup, not all of it goes in its pocket. In that markup, you'll use £1-2 for other costs, overheads, employees, utilities. These are all indirect costs. Your £2-3 will then go in your pocket. That's your actual profit. That's your net profit. But your gross profit or operating profit would be just say £15. That's your operating profit. But your actual net profit might be just £3 or £2. So you see how the spectrum of murabaha, how the actual pricing works, where £10 covers the cost price, £5 are for the direct costs related to the sale item. The fuqaha were like, whatever can be mulhaq to the item, or is tabi to the item, or the ziyada in the item, we will add that because we're trying to stay away from khiyan as much as possible. But then you are free to add whatever profit you want. You can add 20%, 30%, 50%. As long as you disclose this to the person, he's happy to buy it. It's in that profit margin that you're charging now, which will cover all your other expenses, which are not connected at all with the sale item. So in the other profit portion, you'll cover your expenses and your own profit will be there. That's how murabaha works from a pricing perspective in today's time. Right? So it's good to look at an income statement or profit and loss account. I'll share that with you, just so you have a visual of how profits are actually calculated today, because that will give you a realization of how this actually works today. It's not as easy Like it's even, we'll discuss it when we get to inshallah mudaraba, right? Which is challenging. For instance, in a mudaraba, just like 2 days ago, somebody asked me this question, that how do we determine profit in a mudaraba? Do we use gross profit? Do we use operating profit? Can we use EBITDA? Can we use net profit? Which profit do we actually use from a Sharia perspective? What's allowed and what's not allowed? So you have to understand, there has to be an understanding of accounting convention and what it means on an income statement, and then the implication. You have to understand the fiqh and put it all together. So it is quite complicated, to be honest, but we have to reason it and we have to kind of understand it, what's happening, and what would the fiqh say, and where is there scope to use. Okay. We'll stop here. Any questions? Any questions that anybody has? I know it'll make more sense when you see inshallah, the balance or the income statement. But hopefully I've given you that kind of spectrum of how we capture the costs.
Mufti Sahib, just about the last matan we read.
Mhm.
What does tiraz and wal fatal mean?
Yeah, if somebody, can you please help me with that? It's just not in my head at the moment. الطراز المذهب. طراز. How do you translate this? Anybody? We all have
It's like
access.
embroidering something on,
Okay, and fatal is
I believe.
can you we all got access to the internet. Anybody? Was
Just looking at Hansway, it looks like something to do with twisting rope, possibly.
Yeah, I think when you wrap the thread around the loom or something.
okay. Let's go with that.
Okay.
Let's try to get a more accurate definition of this in English. Inshallah. Yeah, like twisting or spinning a habal, like fatul habal. You're selling a rope, you're twisting it. It's a direct activity on the sale item itself. Haqiqah. But we'll stop here. We'll carry on inshallah from here, and then let's get some precise translations of these terms inshallah. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Let's stop here and we'll continue next week from this thing. And I'll share with you an income statement as well, inshallah. Okay, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.